The name is 100% related to the situation I was in when I had the idea for this sweater. I'm showing you how to do the actual knitting step by step. Trust me, it's much easier to work this one from a chart than it would be from a written instruction. Otherwise, it would be 60-page long pattern. Hello, my name is Jeanette. I am the designer behind Jeanette Knits, and welcome to a pattern deep dive / tutorial on the new pattern of mine called the Neveah Sweater, the one that I'm wearing. And in this video, I'll talk to you a little bit about the inspiration, the gauge and needles and yarn that I used, the sizing, as well as all the techniques used and the construction of the sweater. And after this little introduction, there will be a series of tutorials that guide you step by step on all the things you need to do to knit this sweater. Note that this video does not include all of the tutorials and demos that support this pattern. For that, you should come and join my school group and take the course on how to knit the Neveah sweater in an online course format where you can even mark your progress as you go through. The name is 100% related to the situation I was in when I had the idea for this sweater. And that was, I was sitting at my hairdresser's and he was dyeing my hair a little bit darker after he had gone through the summer bleaching by the sun. And as he was drying it off, there was a little bit of sun ray coming through the window and making my hair very shimmery and very nice. And some of the strands of hair, or how do you call it, were kind of making an interesting cable pattern. Of course, I'm a knitter and I see cables everywhere, that I thought, oh wow, that would be a nice sweater. And I had yarn in exactly that color called Tasty Chocolate, and I thought, wow, it would look like a very posh chocolate bar, so I have to make a sweater like that. And at the same time, I was having these thoughts and seeing these cables. My stylist was talking about babies and baby names, and if he had a daughter, he would love to name her Neveah, which is heaven spelled backwards. And I just thought that was so cute. So I found it appropriate to ask him for his permission to name this sweater pattern after his hypothetical daughter's name, because I loved how cute that whole thing was. The yarn that I'm using is a DK weight yarn, and it was a gift from an app called Knit and Note. It's a crafters app where you can put all your projects in one place, and for the subscribers they also offer access to a huge pattern library in different languages, and a lot of my patterns are on there as well, so you just pay a monthly subscription fee and you get access to the patterns with no extra cost. And they have recently also released new yarns, and one of them is this Highland wool, and they sent a sample box for me to try out, and I just love the color. It was also really pleasant to work with, and I love the texture. I am wearing it on bare skin and it's really soft to touch. No issues there at all. I guess if your skin was a little sensitive, then perhaps a close neck might not be the best option, but honestly, it's really soft. But any DK weight yarn will do, as you'll see later in the tutorials. After I finished this sweater, I realized that video support would be crucial to get knitters through this interesting construction. And I started to make another version in a much lighter color to make sure that all the details show well on the video. So, and that worked out as well. So any solid, I recommend solid color to make sure that the pattern stands out. The gauge, well, it differs between the different cable sections, and you can see the details for that in the pattern, but just for a reference, the stockinette is 20 stitches times 28 rows in a 10 by 10 centimeter, 4 by 4 inches. And we work the main fabric on what I needed to get the gauge was for a millimeter needle that is US size 6. And then for the cuffs and the hem, as well as the sections here for the neckline, the collar and the button band, we go down about 3 sizes. So I had to use 3.25, and that is US 3, I believe, to just get a more dense and more structured fabric for durability. The pattern comes in 9 sizes, and the recommended ease is a little comfortable, so for 6 to 8 inches, or that's 15 to 20 centimeters, but I wouldn't go beyond that because it does have this set in sleeve construction. So if you want, if you were going with more ease, chances are that your shoulder seams would fall down too low for the sleeve construction to make sense, and you might get some bulging here at the cap, which expects to be just at the edge of the shoulder. And so it's quite comfortable, but still very put together and almost fitted. So the smallest size comes out to be 97 centimeters or 38.5 inches around the chest. For the largest one is 177 centimeters, and that's 70.5 inches around the chest. And as I talk through the construction of the sweater, I'll also try and mention all the interesting techniques that I used. So it has a top-down and seamless construction with a European shoulder and a set-in sleeve, a sloped collar, and double knit button bands here to finish the neck opening. And we start with casting on the stitches at the back, and we increase stitches here along the shoulder seam there. And once we reach the full width of the back, we continue down to where we want to start shaping the armholes with some increases. And all the time, we also follow a cable chart that has the shoulder increases included in the chart. Mind you, you do have to know how to read charts because there's many different charts that are included for the different sections, and they are not accompanied by the written instructions. But trust me, it's much easier to work this one from a chart than it would be from a written instruction. Otherwise, it would be 60-page long pattern. And once we've reached the underarm area, we start working on the left and right fronts separately. I don't know if I did that right. Left for me and right for me here. But regardless, you can start with whichever you need to. We pick up stitches here along that shoulder seam and work it straight to about here. Yes, some of the front will go towards the back. So essentially the front does come out much longer. As you can see, the front here reaches all the way to the end of the sleeve cut here. And then we start shaping the neckline by adding some increases here and finally working straight to where we again need to mimic the underarm or the armhole shaping increases that we did for the back, and the same for the front here. And eventually we join the front and the back all together to work in the round, and that's when we start working the chart, just reading from right to left, which is an interesting adjustment if you've been used to working the charts flat. And then at any point you could either continue straight all the way down to hem, which is a 2x2 rib on the smaller needles, or you can take a break and do something more exciting, like for example adding the button bands and the collar, or adding the sleeves. So the button bands are added first before you can add the collar, and they are 2 plackets, I guess they're called, that are double knit by picking up stitches along here vertically and at the base where we join the fronts. The inner button band first. So if you want to have the buttonholes in the opposite one that is in the pattern, then you have to work the right button. I work the right button band first because that's where my buttons sit, and the left button band is then added on top to contain the buttonholes. But if you want to reverse that and you want the right button band to have the buttonholes, you should start with the left button band and obviously omit the buttonholes. Once you watch the videos, you'll see how the buttonhole is made, and you will be able to figure out how to adjust the pattern to support the switch. Once you've added the buttonholes, well, it's a vertical buttonhole in a double knit band. And then we will bind off all the stitches here with a tubular bind off, which is just like Kitchener stitching the two sides of the double knit fabric. And after both of the button bands are complete, we can then pick up stitches along the neckline to add the collar. The collar is worked to some height, and immediately after like a centimeter or so, we start adding short rows here to get the back of the neck higher than the front. And we do that for about, we have about 13 turns on each side. And then we resolve all the short rows and fold it inwards and attach to the base of the neck, by binding it off by picking up one of the stitches at the base row and then binding off, and we're finished with this. Now, the collar originally did have a little bit of a height here, and there were some holes you could literally put your finger through, but after blocking it, I realized that that's not the look that I liked, so I just seamed the sides of the collar, the edge of the collar, to the top of the button band in each side. And I've included that modification also in the pattern, and there's a tutorial on how to do that if you also decide that you prefer this look. And finally, the exciting part is the sleeves and the short row shaped cap. I'm using the Japanese short rows, but any short row method would do, where we pick up the stitches around the armhole here, and then we work back and forth the cap along with some decreases, because the upper arm circumference is smaller than the armhole circumference, so we need to lose some stitches there, and the pattern has all those decreases incorporated in the short row section. And once we finish the cap, we work the rest of the sleeve in the round down to the cuff with some decreases. And as usual, my patterns do have a fake seam for the sleeves as well as for the body to give it some structure. And then all it's left is to block the sweater, weave in the ends, and attach the buttons. You can use less buttons or more buttons depending on how big you want them to be, and you can also adjust the buttonhole height to fit your buttons quite easily after you've seen the tutorial. As it is worked from the top down, you can easily adjust the length of the body and the sleeves, as well as do a different collar if you wanted to. So there are options for you to customize this sweater. So for the rest of the video, I'm showing you how to do the actual knitting step by step. But remember that it won't have the full set of videos for this pattern. And I hope that you are inspired to join our school community, where you'll find the full course on how to do this sweater. I hope you enjoy that, and I'll see you in the next one. To cast on, we'll need a set of needles that match the gauge. For me, that is 4 millimeters. And the yarn, and we leave a little bit of tail because we only need to cast on 38 stitches across all sizes. And I suggest a cast on that's easy to pick up stitches for knitting in the opposite direction. That will be needed later for the neckline. And for me, that's a long tail cast on. And if you are using long tail cast on, I also suggest casting on 2 needles at the same time, like so. That will make it not only easier to work the next row, but also easier to pick up stitches, because the first row will be a little looser. Here I have my 38 stitches, and I'm ready for the setup row. I just need 2 needles for that. So I'll pull one out, leaving all the stitches on one needle, and turn to wrong side. Ready to work the setup row. For that, we will need 2 stitch markers. We will purl the first 3 stitches. Place our first stitch marker that will indicate the start of where we need to look at the chart. And the setup row says to follow chart row 2. So the first chart row is just there to make sure that all the right side rows are odd numbered, because that's the convention that I'm used to. So, but you have to start following the second row. It's an exact replica of the first row. And we need to be careful because the chart isn't flat. So every wrong side row we're reading from the left side. Every right side row we're reading from the right side. And we also have to make sure that we're looking at the abbreviations, looking at the symbols and doing the correct side for them. So even to make the next one look like a knit stitch on the right side, we need to purl it. So purling 5. And then we'll be knitting 2 and purling one through the back loop. Then knitting 5. And then we'll be purling 6. And knitting 8. And finally purl 5. Before placing another marker, because that's the end of the chart, and we purl the last 3 stitches. And that's our setup row done. Row 1 is part of the 2-row repeat that sets up the pattern for the back, and it's all involving the back chart. So we'll be working the first 3 stitches, knitting them to the marker. That will be every time we are on the right side row. We'll be slipping the marker, and then according to the chart we will need to do a left leaning increase, a twisted left leaning increase, and that's done by picking up a stitch from row below, from the one that we already worked here, and knitting that through the front loop like so, and we create a new stitch. And then we'll follow the chart's next row, and that is row 3 in this case. And here is where we do our first tricky cable, that is 3 over 3, right leaning, purling closed twisted cable over knit. So what that means is there'll be 3 stitches leaning over another 3 stitches, and the lean will be in the right direction, and the top 3 stitches will be a twisted stitch enclosed in 2 purl stitches, and the bottom 3 stitches that will be leaning under the ones that are leaning over will all be knit. So over knit means we'll knit the stitches that come from under. And here is how you would do that without a cable needle. So first we'll insert the needle here in the 3 stitches, the second set of 3 stitches from the front, and we'll slip the first, well, we'll slip all 6 of them off the left hand needle like so, very carefully so we don't lose them. And we'll pick up the first 3 stitches just on the left hand needle, while bring the second set of 3 stitches over them and put them back on the left hand needle. And this is where we do our purl and close twisted part. So purl 1, knit through the back loop, purl 1, those are the top 3 stitches done, and then because it was over knit, we simply knit the next 3 stitches. It will become visible what that looks like later on. The rest of the chart is as seen, so whatever's on your needle, if you're good at reading your knitting, then whatever you see on the needle is what you do until you get to the marker. And we do a right leaning twisted increase before slipping the marker, because the increases belong to the charted section. So we pick up a stitch from row below, from a stitch that has not been worked yet, place it on the needle and knit through the back loop. So notice how I placed it on the needle with the right hand needle tip being at the back, so I can simply knit through the back loop as soon as it's on there. Then I slip the marker and knit the final 3 stitches. So this will be the pattern row, right side row, until throughout the rest of the chart of the back. The only thing that will change is what happens here in the charted section, because we always follow the next chart row. And row 2 sets the wrong side pattern for the back section, and it goes like this. We purl the first 3 stitches, slip the marker, and we do a twisted left leaning purl increase. So we always pick up a stitch from row below on the other side of the marker. So when we are at the start of the row, we're picking up from the stitches that already worked. When we are at the end of the row, we'll be picking up from stitches that are yet to be worked. So here we are at the start of the row, and we pick up the strand and we purl through the back loop so that it's twisted, like so. And then we work the rest of the stitches to the marker following the next row of the chart, which is row 4. And usually on the wrong side, you'll be working the stitches as seen. So if you're good at reading your knitting, if you see a purl stitch, you'll be purling it. If you see a knit stitch, just be careful with the cable. It's a little hard to sometimes understand what's going on. One of the stitches is twisted, yeah, so here it's hard to tell what purl stitch it is. I just know it's a twisted one from the chart, so be careful about that as well. Here, these are the bottom 3 that were all knitted on the right side, so we'll purl them. And here we have to knit one, purl through the back loop, knit one to be looking like on the right side. Let's get to the end of the chart. And here we do the opposite increase, so a right leaning twisted purl increase. I pick up a strand from a row below, a stitch below, place it on the needles. Here I'll be knitting through the front loop like so to get it twisted, and slipping the marker, purling the last 3 stitches. And this sets the pattern for all the wrong side rows to come until we're done with the back chart. Row 5 of the back chart is where we first encounter the 3/2 right leaning twist, purling closed twist cable over knit. So these 3 stitches, that is the purl, twisted purl, are always the ones that are traveling. So we always take them over, and then the number of stitches over 3, 2, or 1 is what varies, and they could be knit or purl depending on where we are. So in this case it will be 3/2. We insert the right needle in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th stitch from front, like so. We slip all 5 of the needle, and then pick up the first and second one just on the left hand needle over from the back, so that the third, fourth, and fifth lean over the first and second, and we transfer them back to the left hand needle again. And we will be purling the first one, twisting, that's knitting through the back loop, the second one, and purling the third stitch. That is the purl and close twisted part. And then over knit means we knit the 2 stitches that come from under. Row 5 of the back chart is also where we encounter for the first time the 3/1 left leaning purl and close twisted cable over purl. So because it's left leaning, we'll be picking up the 4th stitch. We just need 1 to come from under, from the back, inserting the right needle like so, slipping all 4 off the left hand needle, and then picking up the first 3 again on the left hand needle, and then transferring that 1/4 stitch to be the first one on the left hand needle, which we will purl because it's over purl. And here we do the purl and close twisted part. So purl 1, knit through the back loop, purl 1. The 3/1 right leaning purl and close twisted cable, as first encountered in the row 7 of the back chart, is again a right leaning one. So we will be grabbing these 3 traveling stitches from the front, that's second, third, and fourth, and slipping all 4 off the left hand needle and picking up the first one back on the left hand needle from the back, and transferring these 3 stitches on the left hand needle. And then, as usual, purl, knit through the back loop, purl, and as this is over knit, the stitch that comes from under is knit. And you'll see that this is over knit because we need to have 6 knit stitches in a row here to form that knit column, and in the consecutive rows these stitches will be traveling over a purl stitch. The 3/2 purl and close twisted cable over purl is first encountered on row 9 of the back chart, and because it's left leaning, we'll be grabbing stitches from behind, and because it's over 2, we need to grab 2 stitches. That is the 4th and 5th stitch from behind with the right hand needle, and we slide all stitches off, all 5, the left hand needle, and carefully pick up the first 3 to go back on the left hand needle so that they're leaning left over the 4th and 5th, and then we transfer the 4th and 5th on the left hand needle as well. Because it's over purl and these stitches come from under, we purl both of them, and then we do the usual purl 1, knit through the back loop, purl 1. Row 9 of the back chart is also where we first encounter the 3/1 right leaning purl and close twisted cable over purl. So because we have already 6 knit stitches here, the next one that comes behind these traveling will have to be a purl, and because it is right leaning, so we need to grab the 3 traveling stitches from the front. So we're just skipping 1 this time because it's over 1, and we slide all 4 off the left hand needle, pick the first one up with the left hand needle, and then bring the 3 next stitches and over and transfer them on the left hand needle. And we do the purl and close twisted part by purling, knitting through the back loop and purling. And lastly, we purl that 1 stitch that was under. The 3/3 left leaning purl enclosed twisted cable is first encountered in row 11 of the back chart, and as left leaning we'll assist it. It's a 6 stitch cable, so the first 3 stitches will be leaning over the 4th, 5th and 6th. So the 4th, 5th and 6th we need to grab from the back by inserting the right hand needle into it like so, slipping all 6, and carefully you can see I'm using my thumbs to bunch up the fabric underneath the stitches so there's no stretching, and then I can easily pick up the stitches with the tip of my left hand needle, put them on there, and then transfer the 4th, 5th and 6th stitch back on the left hand needle as well. And as this was over knit, I need to knit the stitches that came from under, so I'm going to knit 3 and then do my purl, knit through the back loop, purl, and that is the 3/3 left leaning purl enclosed twisted cable over knit. The knit 2 together through front and then back first appears in row 13 of the back chart, and it's not a cable but it looks like one because there is a little bit of leaning over happening, and that's due to the knit 2 together part. So we're trying to knit 2 together, but before we sliding these 2 stitches off the needle and just ending up with 1 new stitch, to compensate for that decrease we need an extra stitch. So we'll do that by knitting through the back of the first of the 2 stitches. So we knit through the back loop of that first one, and now we have 2 stitches on the right hand needle, and we can slide the 2 of the left hand needle. And because of that knit 2 together, the second stitch is lying over the first stitch, giving it a cable-like appearance, but it's much easier to work than a 1x1 cable. And this is what it should look like once you've completed the back chart for all sizes, but because for some sizes we still need to continue increasing the shoulder, there are additional increases specified, and except we are no longer going to be following the back chart. What the back chart has done is set up all the necessary stitches to fit in cable A here from the marker to 2 stitches after this knit 2 together front and back cable, and then a cable B from here to there, and then another cable A. So we'll be following those individual cable charts instead of one big wide chart. And the increases haven't really changed. It's just the instruction for working the row has. We'll still knit the first 3, but this time we're no longer going to slip the marker because the charted section has grown to its maximum. We're not going to be adding any more stitches to it. We're going to be adding stitches outside it, and those will keep working in stockinette. So we add 1 more, and then the instructions say if stitches left, knit to marker. I don't have stitches left. For the first time you repeat this row, you won't have any stitches left, so just slip the marker. Find the first row of cable A and work that here, then the first row of cable B, work that across these stitches, and finally finish with cable A again. Then slip the marker and work the increase after the marker, because now we're increasing the stitches that go beyond the charted section. On the wrong side it's the same thing, but now we'll have some stitches to work between where we do the increase and the marker. And of course we're reading the charts from the opposite direction when we work the wrong side. Once you have completed all the increases, it means this side, the width here, will no longer grow. And this is where we will be starting to pick up the stitches to add the front. This will make the shoulder seam. So it's a good idea to add a locking stitch marker into this first stitch to indicate where we need to stop picking up stitches. In this direction we'll be picking up from here. This is where we'll need to stop. And then for the other shoulder, we need to put the stitch marker in the last stitch so that we know where to begin, as we will be picking up in this direction starting here. But that's later. Now we need to just complete a few rows of straight until we get to where we'll be adding extra stitches to shape the armholes. And the pattern's very easy for those of you who did the additional increases here. There's no more increases. We simply knit to the first marker, slip it, and look at the next row of the charts. So cable A chart. So if you finished after row 2, the next row will be row 3, etc. If you are size 1 and you're just starting to introduce cable A and cable B, then you'll start with row 1 of cable A here, work row 1 of cable B, work row 1 of cable A. When you get to the other marker, we'll slip the marker and knit the remaining stitches. And you do the wrong side similarly by purling, following cable A from the other side, then cable B. If it's helpful, you can put little markers where the cable charts start and end, but I thought it was quite intuitive for me because cable A finishes 2 stitches after these, well, here, after these knit 2 together little cables, so I just found that it was getting in my way. But if it helps you, don't feel free to add a little marker. Just note that that marker is not included in the instructions, so when it says knit to marker, just the only 4 markers that are supposed to be in your work according to the instructions are these markers that denote where the cable charts start, and these 2 locking stitch markers that we'll only remove when we're picking up stitches for the fronts. After completing the straight section of the back, there's just one more section before we'll pause on the back, and that is adding increases here at the sides to shape the armholes. Both sides will be done symmetrically the same, just like we did with the increases here for the shoulders, except this time we'll be increasing on every second row, so just on the right side rows, and again we'll be increasing on outside of the charted area. So we always knit the first 3 stitches and then do the increase, so the same twisted lifted increase where we pick up the stitch from row below from the side. So on this side of the work we'll be picking up from the stitch that we just worked, the left leaning, and on this side of work we'll be picking up from the stitch that is yet to be worked, so right leaning. And making sure that we do that for size 1, your marker will be here, but just for the first one, the rest of the time you'll knit to marker and continue following the same cable charts that you have done thus far. Now we're done with the back section and we're ready to start the front, beginning with the left shoulder. So I've placed the back in the direction it would be worn so that this becomes left shoulder. And we could be putting stitches on holder, but because I know that we'll be working this as one piece once both fronts are added, I'll leave them on the same needles. But it's probably easier to put them on some waste yarn or on holder for the time being, if that's easier for you. So I'll also be using the same strand without cutting, because sometimes things need to be unraveled for any reason. And so we have to find the strand that is between the first stitch column and the second stitch column. So the second stitch column is really easy to see. That was the direction we were knitting in from here neck down to there. So these are the two legs of the second stitch column. The first stitch column is harder to identify, but well, it's the one that's next to the second stitch column. So I can see that these strands here are the strands that I'll need to be picking up. And unfortunately, the first row is always tricky to figure out where to insert the needle. So anywhere is okay, really, as long as what follows is kept consistent. So I'm over the first row. The next one is this strand, and then it becomes much easier. And sometimes, especially if you're using yarn that isn't so stretchy or elastic, it can be quite hard to stretch this loop out enough to get this new stitch through. Then you can use the other needle to help for a bit. So once you've found the strand that you want to pick up, you can place it on this other needle and knit through as you would normally through a stitch. Well, it looks like you would be knitting through the back loop of it, but I'm sure you can see what I mean. It's easier to stretch out with two needles than with one. And you should see a very neat seam forming here, as long as you keep it consistent where you are picking up the strands from and not jump between stitch places like this. So just keeping between the second column and the first, and it's easy to see that by following the leg of the second stitch column. So where it comes out here, that's where we need to pick up the strand. And once you've reached the specified number of stitches in the pattern for the shoulder, you should be at your locking marker, which you now can remove. It's quite important that you do get the right stitch count, because the rest of the shoulder pattern depends on that count. After we picked up the stitches, we can set up the cable section that will be working. So we'll be placing a marker to have the cable eye running across the front shoulder. That means we'll need to purl a specified number of stitches. For my size, it's 5. Should be the same number of stitches that you worked on the sides for the back for a while before starting the cable section. So I should have 5 stitches here as well. You should have an equal number for your size. Then we place a marker and we find row 10 of cable A, and that should be read from the left to right because we are on the wrong side. And the reason it's number 10, row number 10, is because this is European shoulder. The back will be slightly shorter than the front because some of the front goes towards the back, and that's why there's a little bit of an offset. And so row 10 for me is knitting 2, purling 2. Well, for everybody, row 10 is the same. And then we should all have 4 stitches left here on the side. Well, there's not enough right now to do another cable, so everyone has the same pattern. On the wrong side, that is knit 3 and purl 1. And on the right side, for a while, we'll be knitting 1, purling 3, and then working the next row of cable A until for the specified number of rows for your size, and then we'll start adding stitches here to close the neck. Once we worked for a while along these stitches here that we picked up, we are ready to start shaping the neckline by adding stitches here on the neck edge, and we'll be doing it slightly differently than we did the increases for the back. So always be knitting the first stitch, and that stitch is creating the edge from which we'll be picking up the stitches for the collar later on. And we'll be increasing right after the first stitch, but in order to do that easily, we'll be picking up stitches from the inner side as opposed to how we did for the back, that we picked up from the outside. So here we pick up from under the stitch that we haven't worked, because the first increase is a purl increase, a twisted right leaning lifted twisted purl increase. We pick up the purl bump from row below, we place it on the needle, and we knit through purl through the front loop to get it twisted, and then we purl the rest and continue working cable A as established before. And here we just have to be careful whether we do a knit increase or a purl increase, because across this section, as we increase the stitches, we'll be establishing a new knit purl columns ready to begin the cable B chart when we have enough stitches. So that's why you should be careful paying attention what kind of increase it is and how to work the remaining stitches to ensure that there's 4 purl stitches, etc., and a certain number of knit stitches as specified in the pattern. After finishing the neckline shaping, we should have enough stitches here to fit another cable in, the cable C, before we work across these cable A stitches. And the cable C is interesting in that it offers 2 versions of the chart. The first repeat is for the first time you work through the rows of cable C, so the first repeat row wise, and then once you've completed all of that, the consecutive rows should all be following the all other repeats. And we will be introducing this sort of cable. It's just that for the first repeat we don't have a beginning for these legs that run across here, so it's a little bit adjusted to cater for that. And the first stitch is always knit, and then because we're doing the cable C for the first time, we work row as specified in the pattern for your size. For my size it's row 3, and that means I need to do a little knit through the back loop there, knit all the other stitches here all the way to marker, and then it's in the established pattern. So cable A across here, knit all stitches across here, and then when we turn to the wrong side, we'll be working cable A first and cable C for the remaining stitches, and always purl that last stitch here. And we do that for the specified number of rows that are listed in the pattern. After we've established the cable C here, it's also time to start the armhole shaping like we did for the back. So we'll be adding just as many stitches here at the front as we did at the back, and we're going to do a exactly symmetrical increase there. So when I get here, we'll work to 3 stitches before the end, and as we did for the back, we're going to be increasing by picking up a stitch from the stitches still to be worked. So from the outside, that's a twisted, lifted, right leaning increase, and we'll do that as many times as the pattern says, just to be exactly as the back. And we should end with the exact same chart row for cable A and cable C as we did for cable A and cable B at the back, as then we'll be joining in the round after we've also added the right front. after finishing the left front, it's time to add the right front, and we'll do exactly the same things just in a mirror image. So we'll start picking up, and this time with the right side facing of the back shoulder, we'll be picking up here from this direction. Again, identify the second stitch column, and that would be this one. You see where the leg comes out, and that's the strand to pick, and all the way up here along the same column of strands until you get the desired number of stitches. Then we'll do another setup. We'll be just working on the opposite as we did here. We'll establish the edge here and then the column A, and we'll work straight for a while until we're ready to shape the neckline. We'll be adding stitches again, a few purl, a few knit, to set us up for introducing column C on this side. So the increases will now be at the end of the right side row, and they will be from the stitch that we've just worked just before the last stitch there. And then we'll work again a column C, first repeat to begin with, and then once it's finished we'll focus on the all other repeats chart. And finally, adding symmetrical increases here for the underarm also on this side, so at the start of the row. And then we'll be ready to join everything in the round in one piece. At any point after joining the body in the round, as we've joined the two fronts with the base of the neckline, we can also add the button bands, starting with the right button band that doesn't have any buttonholes. If you wanted to swap which button band has the buttonholes, that's possible, just a little bit of a deviation from the instructions, but I'll demo as it's written in the instructions. So we will be working the button bands flat from the base of the neckband all the way up to where the neckline, and we'll be working them in double knit. So we'll be picking up stitches here along the base, double the amount of stitches because we're working on 2 layers at the same time, and simultaneously we'll be joining that band to the side here. And for that reason we also need to pick up stitches along here that we then work together with the button band stitches as we move up. And for that we'll need the smaller needle and obviously new ball of yarn. And we'll start with picking up the vertical column of stitches, because as the work happens down here, there isn't really an easy way to pick up all stitches in one go and then get back to where we need to work. So we pick up the vertical ones first, cut yarn, and then proceed to pick up the base ones. So very similarly to how we did picking up the stitches for the shoulders, we again find that side stitch. This is the direction of knitting, so where you see this time the second column stitches is purl. So when you find the purl stitch wherever the leg comes out, this is the strand that we need to pick up, like so. But of course we'll be beginning here at the base, and I wouldn't worry about the corners right now. That will be handled by when we pick up the base stitches. So I'm going to find the last time I work this, that's the last stitch. So this is probably a good place for me to start picking up the side stitches. One, two, three, and it should look something like this. And we go all the way up to the top. You should have exactly the number of rows worked as specified, the number of stitches. And yeah, if you don't get the exact same number of stitches, that's not a big deal, as long as you get the stitches that you pick up for the other button band are the same, because we want the button bands to be the same length. Not necessarily exactly the same as the pattern states, but they should just be the same length for your project. So when I get up here, I'll come back and we'll show you how we pick up the stitches for the base. Here I've done the vertical pickup and I've got yarn. To keep things simple, you can take a separate needle, because it's very easy to make a mistake here. Which end you pick, or difficult to describe, but I know that I will be working with the same needle across the stitches, so I'm using that top end of the needle and bringing it back down to the said corner where we start to pick up stitches for the base. And it says to pick up a stitch in the corner, and that is to avoid the holes forming. So I will find the corner as the stitch that was the edge stitch here, or is the edge stitch that leads into the stitch column, as that is the first stitch column before the stitches that were then cast on. And if I just put my needle through the stitch like so and pick up, it's going to leave quite a hole. So for this corner stitch, what I like to do is pick up just the side leg of it and make sure that when I knit through, it twists, and that's how it closes the potential hole, so the hole isn't as big. Let me do that again. So I find the stitch that I want to insert my needle into. Is it this one or that one? And I pick up the side leg and knit into that instead, so that it doesn't leave a hole. Now it still looks like a hole. I can go back and fix it. Maybe I should pick it up from top to bottom like so, and it will be more twisted that way. Yes, that looks more twisted, so more twisted is good because we want to conceal the holes. And what it also says is before we pick up the next stitch, at the same time as we pick up, after every stitch, we need to do a yarn over. That is to ensure that we have enough stitches for 2 layers of the button band. So the picked up and knit stitches will form the front layer, and the yarn overs will form the inside layer of the button band. So as soon as I've found one stitch that I've cast on, I'll knit through it and I do a yarn over right after that. It will be a little bit tricky to follow the cast on stitches because we had a cable in the first few rows and that bunched them all together. If you're using light yarn, you can follow the strands and find the stitches that way. But if you are using darker yarn, then do your best to pick up the required number of stitches and yarn overs that are specified in the pattern. Because if you can't see what you're picking up, chances are no one else will see that you've inserted the needle in the wrong place either. But I will admit it is a little bit of a challenge. After completing the base setup, it should look something like that. Mind that you did not need to do a yarn over after the last stitch, so you should have an odd number of stitches, preferably 27 on this needle. And then we need to turn the work the wrong side, as we will be working back and forth across these picked up stitches here. And let's sort out the needles. So this is the needle that we have all the vertical stitches on, and so that's the needle we'll be using to work across. If you use the temporary needle here, once you get to the end of this row, all your stitches should be on one needle. That's the one with the vertical stitches, and it's quite important that you do the next action with the needle that has the vertical stitches on, because when we slip the first one with the yarn in front and we place the marker, we want that slipped stitch to be right next to the first stitch that was picked up vertically here. That's important for later. And then for the setup round, we need to knit these yarn overs through the back loop to tighten them up. It's just for the first setup row, there'll be knitting through the back loop involved. And as double knit goes, we need to slip every other stitch with the yarn in front. And again, as soon as we encounter the yarn over, we knit that through the back loop, slip with the yarn in front, knit through the back loop, slip with yarn in front, knit through the back loop, all the way to the beginning of this base. And this is what it should look like from the right side after you finish the setup row. The last stitch was a slipped one, and that will be the first one that we knit on the right side, but we just knit through the front loop like usual. And then we'll slip all the purled looking ones with the yarn in front, and that will create our double knitting. So we move like that, knit one, slip one with the yarn in front. And here is where we do the action that will join the double knit band to the vertical edge on the side. So we slip the marker, so slip knitwise, and knit them through the back loop. And then we turn to do the wrong side, and it'll be very similar action. Again, we slip with the yarn in front, we slip the marker, and we knit one and slip one with yarn in front. Make sure you slip the ones that are looking like purl stitches, because those are the stitches that were worked in the previous row. We don't want to continuously slip the same stitch, then it won't move up, but we need to slip every second stitch. Those are the purl looking ones. Last one on this side is slipped as well. So we repeat the knit one, slip one to the marker and do an SSK here all the way to the top here, and then once you've done the last SSK, do one more wrong side row so you end up here, and then I'll come back and show you how we bind off. And after you've completed all of the rows here and gotten rid of all the side stitches and done one last wrong side row, you should be here at the facing the right side of the top of the sweater. And we're ready to do the tubular bind off, and for that we'll need a tapestry needle, and we'll need to leave a tail of approximately 30 centimeters, 12 inches should do it. And we don't need to do any setup rounds for this tubular bind off because it's already set up as a double knit. We'll just need to remember a mantra that we need to repeat until all the stitches have been bound off. So when we are facing a knit stitch first, we'll be inserting the needle knitwise and slipping it off. And then in the third stitch, we'll insert the needle the opposite way, so purlwise, before pulling the yarn. When we're facing a purl stitch first, we'll be inserting the needle purlwise, because that's what we're seeing, slipping it off, and then finding that third stitch to insert the needle knitwise. So we sort of have to come through the first 2 stitches so that we could insert the needle in the third stitch knitwise and pull the yarn. We don't want to pull too tight, but we also don't want to leave it too loose. I'll do a few more and then I'll try and describe how to determine how much to pull. So again, I'm facing a knit stitch, so I go in knitwise, slip, come out purlwise, and when I'm faced with a purl stitch, I go in purlwise and come out knitwise from the third stitch. And we repeat this for all the stitches on the needles. And we're left with a nice finish here. So you should pull the yarn as tightly to create a leg that runs across the top here, that is the same length as the legs of the individual stitches. If you pull it too tight, it will flatten the button band at the top and it won't look nice. And if you leave the yarn too loose, then you'll have some wonky loops and it will not look tidy and neat at the top. But it's a matter of practice and finding your signature here. The more you practice, the better and neater it will turn out. And once you've done all of the stitches, you can just weave in the remaining end. And that's the button band done.